Welcome to Mendix Best Practices by Nolan Ramsey. I'm the Director of Rapid App Dev Solutions at Epiuse, and today I want to share a quick tutorial on how to create and describe and document a proper story in the Mendix platform. All right, hey guys. So what we're looking at here on the screen is an example of a sprint in the Mendix Sprintr, as we lovingly refer to it. And what I wanted to show you here was how do you properly create a story? What do we use the description field for? And what do we use the comments for? So let's dive right in. If I wanted to create a new story, I should start in the backlog, and I'll just create one down here. This is just for an example. So I might create something that, let's come up with a requirement. I'm a manager, and I want to make sure that I can see all of the employees that report to me on my homepage and whether or not they're currently on PTO. Simple enough. So I'll create a story here, and I'll say, as a manager, I want to see my employees and their PTO status on my homepage. Okay. So if you look at the three sections, first you identify the user role. Who is it that's identifying the story? Who are you building this for? And it should be a user role in your system. If it's not, you're probably not targeting the right group. I have seen it where you make things like, as a developer, if you're building backbone infrastructure type of stories in support of that, different schools of thought. Let's not get into that right now. But try to target a user role that's going to log into your system. Next, you identify the requirement that you are wanting to do. So I want to see my employees and their PTO statuses. Simple enough. Now, the last piece that I didn't add here was why. So it's always good to add the motivation to your story. Why do you want this? And for me, it is so I can determine who is available. Okay. That's important to the developer because when you're designing a feature and you're trying to deploy it for the customer, you can understand what the useful information is and how to emphasize it. You know, your UX designers can really use that information to determine the best way to show that off. Okay, next, determine whether it's a feature or a bug. In this case, it's a new feature that we're building. Now, I don't know enough to do story points. That's part of the backlog grooming session. That's a different process. We're not going to cover that today. Labels, also not going to cover that in this particular video. The description is where I should add any useful information that the team would need to understand more about this particular story, to understand the context of this story. So, for example, maybe I want to say this is strictly for line managers, as an example. Or maybe I want to add something else that says only voluntary PTO. So I'm excluding involuntary PTO, like I've put someone on a administrative leave of absence or anything like that. Okay, so once you've added a description and given some background about what it is that you want to do, you can post the story. That's one way to go about doing it. I'm going to dive into the details of this just to bring up the other view and work off of this for just a second here. So not spending a ton of time on dates and so forth. What I wanted to dive into quickly with this is so that you understand what we use comments for as a best practice. That's what this whole video is really about. This is where you need to log the definition of done. It's important to do it in the comments because you can't change them. The person who creates the comments can change it and delete that comments, but they're not going to because it's the definition of done. If you put the definition of done of a story into the description field, anybody with access to the story can and potentially will change the definition of done, and you don't want that for sure. So it's better to use comments to record that. So what is a definition of done? Simply means, how will I know that this story is done? How will I know that the developers completed it to the specification? Well, I have to give them the specification. So for example, I might just say something like, I expect as a manager, and I better say line, right? As a manager, I log on to my homepage I see a list of my employees only, and my employees only, let's just say by name, sorted, alpha, and their PTO dates for the next 30 days. Okay, I've given a specification so that as a tester, as a product owner, I could come in here, test this story, and I would know whether or not this is done. Now, I'm going to do another short video that talks about labels and how we use labels for the workflow of a story, because the basics of a story is that you get to do. If I click it again, you get running, and I shouldn't have done that because I didn't save my comment, but and then you get done. The developer should never click done. They should just set it to running. We'll get to that in a moment. But by adding the comments here, it gives them the definition of done. So you already saw me type the other one, definition of done. And now I can post the comment, and it's got a date timestamp associated to it. People can comment on the definition of done if there's questions, but ultimately testers can use that to determine whether or not that's done. The other great thing about a comment, if I wanted to leave another one, is you can attach a screenshot. So if you did a mock-up on your UX, for example, that said this page should look like this, add it right here. Then there's no question at all about this story and what it is that needs to be accomplished. All right. I hope that this was super useful for you. Try to make it quick, tight, and easy to understand the concept here. And I'll put a few more out there around this topic. Hope it helps. Thanks.